Cool. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Under the Hat. We are in May already, and I've had snow this evening. I think Stuart's had snow today as well, so it's a bit of a crazy one. But we are massively excited to welcome a very special guest tonight, and really to help us navigate through some big questions that we have in the golf coaching industry. So I'd like to welcome John O'Sullivan from, well, I guess you have so much experience in the world of sport. It's basically, you are from the world of sport, John. So welcome to Under the Hat tonight. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you spending the time.
Oh, it's great to be here and hopefully help out some people in a sport that I love very much. Has been a big part of my life since I was a young kid. So
Yeah. I think your whole business is a changing the game project, changing the game, understanding where the game was, where it's at, where it needs to be. I think those are some of the questions that I would like to ask and have answered. But perhaps you could just give us a little bit of an insight into how you came to, I guess I'm going to call you an expert, how you came to be an expert in this field of understanding participation and how kids are engaged in all sports, really.
yeah, I mean, and I don't really see myself as an expert in this space. I think all of us who work with kids have a lot of this knowledge inside us. We understand it when we are able to take the time and think about it. If we happen to also be a parent or we've worked with kids long enough, like um there's this, we do certifications and all that as coaches and as teachers and as instructors. But then I think there's just what a lot of those things meet a lot, and what Gavin, you and I have spoken about in the past, is just the human side of things, right? Young children in sport are not robots that it's not like the Matrix, right? Where we just upload a file and then all of a sudden they have these skills. They're human beings and they have emotions and they need inspiration and they need communication, and they have good days and they have bad days, and we have to make sure that we always remember and treat them like human beings. And I think that's one of the most important things. So what I've done with Changing the Game project in the last number of years is spent a lot of time reading the research on child development, social emotional learning, things like that, and intertwining that with the research and leadership. And how can we be better teachers? How can we be better mentors? And how can we be not just trainers or instructors, but how can we truly be coaches who invest in the entire human being? And so, yeah, I've written 2 books about it and have a podcast and blog. I just finally, got off my tail and wrote a new blog post last night for the first time in about 2.5 months. I was a little burnt out on that for a while. So, but that was just all about like how to be a great teammate and what's the quality of a great teammate and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what we do when we work with sport governing bodies all over the world across tons of different sports. My background is a high level, or sort of not that high level athlete, but and a coach was, in football or soccer. But I grew up playing golf and baseball and basketball and wrestling, and I ski and I mountain bike and I do all these other things. So I just love sport. I love movement. I love getting out there and doing stuff. And I just want to see a generation of kids who loves activity as much as I do.
I often now talk about the dire need for us to protect the future of our sport. If I'm going to be selfish and obviously talk about golf, I know many sports are struggling, and I've coached soccer as well in the US, and I understand the context of the dropout rates and what's behind it. But what you actually motivate me to dig deeper into the reasons why kids drop out, and they ultimately drop out not because of the distractions that they face when they become teenagers, but because we haven't engaged them well enough in our activities from a young enough age in the first place. And so we have to answer those questions. For me, for the 5 to 12-year-olds, it's absolutely our number one priority to make sure that these kids fall in love with our activity, which is golf, as much as possible, enough for them to play this game for a lifetime. And indeed, we're promoting multi-sports as well, which is so very important for their own development as human beings. And again, we have to shout out about that. But I mean, you've obviously had experiences as a coach and as a parent. So what is the status quo right now in terms of participation, do you think? What are the numbers telling us right now in 2021?
Well, I mean, I think COVID is going to have a big effect. The numbers that I'm familiar with, some of the research done in the United States around sport in general, in 2008 to 2011, when we had a big recession, was, that the numbers dropped and then they never recovered all the way. And then I think this is a far more severe thing because of the pandemic, and not only loss of jobs, but just kids who are shut down or shut out of their only opportunity for exercise. It might have just been PE class or something like that. So I think it's going to be a lot worse this time around. And that to me is what's really scary. And that's where I think sports, as we open back up, have to be super welcoming of how do we get people in the door and then give them what they're looking for while they're there. And I think a lot of them are trying to make up for lost time instead of just saying, let's just engage people with sport, right? The only golfer that doesn't get better is the one who quits, and me, right? But everyone else seems to get better. I think it's just so critical. Like my own 13-year-old son right now, he kind of ebbs and flows out of golf, but right now he wants to play a lot, and it's really cool. We live on a 9-hole course, and he just goes and says, "Dad, I'm going to," and he can play for $10, go play 9 holes, and he goes and plays without me. Doesn't want to play with me. He teams up with other people or goes by himself. He keeps an honest score. He's excited when he makes a par or birdie. But he doesn't want to take golf lessons. He doesn't want to be on a golf team or play in any tournaments. He just wants to go play golf. And I'm like, great, go do that. And I watched him, I watched him in the morning before school play the piano for 45 minutes. But the last time he took piano lessons, he stopped because he had to keep doing the test and he had to keep doing the next level up and had to do the recital. He's like, I don't want to do the recital. I just want to play the piano. And I think in every sport, we really have to just look at, we just want people in our sport, right? We want people to love it and find their own space in it. And can we be creative in how we do that so we don't exclude a ton of potential golfers before they've even had a chance to fall in love with the game?
Yeah, we have to ask ourselves questions, don't we, in any sport? What are we doing? Why are we here? What's our role? What are we actually trying to achieve? I think too many coaches across all sports look for that elite pathway and think that that's the destination, when actually it's so far from the truth. And that is simply not sustainable. And we have to do a better job of creating a more sustainable industry that will support golf going way, way beyond into the future. The byproduct of that engagement, of course, is that elite player that through their own motivation will put the time and effort in and will have the desire to want to learn more, won't they?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it's also, it's also a balance, isn't it, John? Because golf is such a stupid game. It really is. It's daft. You you know, there's some, you just can't explain it sometimes. You know, but it's a case of, well, you know, you're, I guess, addicted to it to a certain point, and you want to get better, but you don't want to put the time in, and you don't want to listen to anyone else. So you just keep doing the things, the same things over and over, expecting different results, which often they classify as the definition of madness, right? But that's where we're at with golf, and it's you do have to find the right balance with kids, and as I said a few minutes ago, you definitely inspire me and motivate me with the stuff that you've put out, that really questions what we do, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And observing many golf coaches around the world and taking a look at coaching academies and different lessons and programs, it just doesn't fit with I guess what you've put out there now, what I tend to believe through my own research as well. So I mean, you know, let's dumb it down a little bit. What are the actual reasons why kids drop out?
Well, I mean, I think
for me, it's too much pressure.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things, but I think maybe what's the overarching thing would be a loss of joy, right? And even as adults, why do we, like, I don't go for running. I don't run anymore because I hate running, right? But I'll ride my bike for 20 miles, right? I'll hike up a mountain and ski it, even as hard as that might be. But 10-minute run, like, I couldn't think of anything worse. And so I think joy is this thing. And so what are the things that reduce joy? Loss of ownership of the experience, right? So parents living vicariously through kids, or coaches living vicariously through kids. Loss of, you know, that brings this sort of loss of intrinsic motivation, right? So this, like, desire to go get better and do it on your own without being asked. And then, like you said, things like pressure. Is there undue pressure being put on? Or are we chasing after mom and dad's goals in the sport and not the kids' goals and stuff like that? And you know, I think this is the thing. And you know, I have friends whose kids play golf, and I mean, you know, I know some really, really good golf coaches who've coached some of the best people in the world. And as you know, Gavin, right, what they all say is at the top of the game, it's not being about a great ball striker, right? Those are a dime a dozen. Like, it's in between your ears. And so that whole state of mind and that whole inner game is something that we develop from a very, very young age. And certainly kids wanting to stick with it, there's got to be something every time I go that makes me want to come back again. And golf's beautiful because, you know, we tend to remember that one good shot and not the 78 terrible ones. And so, you know, there's every time they swing a club is an opportunity to catch them doing something amazing and say something and give them that confidence that makes them want to come back next week. And I think this is what we need to be doing when we're coaches of really young golfers is catching them being good. Because if we don't, right, it's so, I mean, golf, there's no easier sport to be, I think Stephen Rolnick calls it a deficit detective, right? Just, right. You just see all these things and fix the things that are wrong. But I think that there's something about, you know, just also catch the thing that's right and how good you feel about that thing that's right.
Yeah. I think that's magic, isn't it? Capturing those moments upon which you can really build and inspire and infuse. And I think, it's, you know, golf, as you can probably tell from my body language, golf, it drains you, doesn't it? And we can't be like that. We've got to change the narrative to a certain extent. So,
yeah.
What across all sports then at Changing the Game project, what are you kind of doing to try and change it up, really?
I mean, I think first of all, just like you're doing, like get the information out there. There's good research in why kids play, why they drop out. There's good understanding about the reasons and things like that. There's great stuff out there in how to coach and how to teach. And so I try to read the books. I try to, my business partner on the podcast, Jerry, he talks about his analogy. He's like, I'm just the flute, and all this brilliant air from smarter people than me comes in, and I try to make it a nice sound coming out so that people would actually want to listen to it. And I feel like that's kind of what we try to do at Change the Game Project. When I started Changing the Game Project, I was looking around at all these amazing parents and coaches who love their kids and wanted to help and didn't know where to look and didn't know who to trust. I'm like, why don't we have a WebMD for sports? And certainly I'm not that, but I wanted to just be a place where this is a trusted research source that if you read an article, it's vetted. There's research behind it. I didn't just wake up in the morning and have an idea. There's a reason for writing this or publishing this, or interviewing this person. And so, I think that's how the problem is. When there's an absence of information, that void gets filled with fear, right? And parents get scared. And when they get scared, then they sit there and go, they're not quite sure, who to believe or what to do. And so they push into wrong places and they sign up for too many events or whatever it is. And so we have to fill that void with good information to tell them to relax and just be patient. And that, Michael Murphy wrote one of the most famous golf books of all time, right? Golf in the Kingdom. And he says, you got to see the field from above. And I think sports parents, right, we have to see the journey from above, and coaches, we have to see the whole journey and realize that what's happening this week is just a slice. And that, in this slice, it might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing, but if we can see the whole journey, we can be patient during the trying times, right? And we can be, the highs don't get too high and the lows don't get too low, and we don't get too excited about it. And I think that's just a wonderful way to be.
Yeah. John, I think from my side, I mean, it's fascinating information. And I think you said something a little bit earlier that really resonated with me. And it was about, people finding their own space in the sport. And I think as a coach, sometimes, speaking for myself in the past, I would look at that and say, maybe I've been guilty of having my own agenda and thinking I would like the player to do this, and then forgetting that, did I ever ask the player what does the player want, or what does the child want? And I think from all the time you've spent working in multiple sports and working with federations and organizations, everybody that's listening to this is a coach and teaching pretty much full time. What would you see as some of the, I guess, biggest failings of coaches in general from what you've seen from the outside looking in, and maybe where can they do a little bit of self-reflection?
Yeah, I mean, most of us coach the way we were coached, right? And so I think you have to really reflect and say, did I actually have a good coach? Because if I didn't, or was that person a good coach for me, but maybe not for someone else, right? Because I don't think coaches can be vanilla either. I mean, you're not going to be everything to everyone. So coaches should have standards and principles that don't bend, and it's not going to be a fit for everyone, but you can still provide great stuff to a lot of people. And so, if I look at my own childhood growing up in New York, I had a lot of coaches who were Eastern European or something like that. And the way that they provided feedback was not necessarily helpful all the time. It would be angry, it would be demeaning, it would be a lot of different things. And so, I think as a coach, like, number one, right, one of understand learning, So how do people learn? Understand how to give feedback, understand how to check for understanding. These are the things that truly are what great coaching is about. Understand that what you see in the practice in front of you isn't learning, right? You can never see learning in the moment. It's only performance in the moment. Learning is what you see in 3 weeks, and can they remember to do that or not? And so I think these are the type of things that coaches really need to invest their time and their effort into. I'm staring at a book on my desk here by Doug Lemhoff called The Coach's Guide to Teaching, and he's a great teacher educator. And Gavin, I think I recommended that to you, and you got it when we talked last time, and it's an unbelievable book. Yeah, and it's like that. This should be handed to you in any coaching course, because this is the essence of learning and feedback and communication and culture and all this sort of stuff. And so I think that's it. And then Stuart, I think the other piece is like, I think when I was a young coach, I was very much, there's the ego piece of like, oh yeah, that player playing in the Olympics there, yeah, I was his coach, I developed him or something like that, right? But what I've realized now 30 years later is that, I mean, great players, regardless of sport, they make themselves, right? The coach is the facilitator. The coach can help. The coach supports. The coach gives feedback. And I'm not saying the coaches don't contribute anything, but a great golfer becomes a great golfer because of the time they spend on their own and their dedication to the game. And a great soccer player does the same thing, and a great hockey player does the same thing. And I think oftentimes coaches are more of an obstacle than, we can give too much interference. So I think if we start seeing ourselves as this torchbearer and this facilitator, rather than like, oh yeah, I made that kid, or I made that kid. Like, no, you didn't. They made themselves, and you were just lucky to be there on a slice of the journey. And I think that's just a huge thing.
No, I agree. And I think, like you said, that a lot of that as a coach comes with experience and maturity. And I think hopefully that's a little bit why we do what we do every week with these under the hats, to provide opportunities for especially some of the younger coaches that are new to the world of coaching, to learn a bit from our failings or our learnings, if you like, because it's all a journey. And hopefully, like for Gavin and I, we're a cog in the wheel. And if we can help direct people in the right direction, and I think what you just said there about a good golfer becoming a great golfer comes down to them. They make themselves, the time they put in. The same for a coach as well. That continual search for learning. David's mantra is always, those who dare to teach must never cease to learn. And I think that's something that hopefully Gavin and I embrace, and obviously you embrace that as well. So on a personal note for you, how have you dedicated your development to learning and getting better? So what sort of things have you done over the past 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years to continue and develop your own skill sets and craft?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned, books. Like I'm a voracious reader, right? So I'm lucky now that I'm at this point with a blog and a podcast that I also oftentimes get to talk to the authors who write a book about stuff like learning or teaching or psychology or team building or whatever that is. So I'm constantly trying to reach out and learn from other coaches, other people, and getting out of your own sport is one of the most important things you can do, because you have so much to learn. Because the technical aspect of a golf coach or a volleyball coach or whatever, that's training, right? Coaching is where we all meet in the middle. How do you engage? How do you inspire? How do you create positive team dynamics, even in an individual sport? These are important things. So I get to talk to a lot of smart people. I get to read a lot. I still coach, so I keep my toe dipped in the water of coaching, and so I learn something new, and then I go try it, and sometimes it works fantastically, and sometimes it all blows up, and I get to come back and share that with the world that, yeah, I tried this and it totally didn't work. But then, like last night, I covered a practice for a coaching friend of mine, and at the end of it, I called it, and the kid's like, wait, like, why are we picking up? I'm like, well, it's done. We've been here 90 minutes. And they're like, no, we haven't been here 90 minutes. Like, that was like the fastest practice ever. I'm like, oh, good. That was pretty good then. Like, that one went well, So I think that's the kind of stuff that's really important. And then, so this is something that I started doing recently, which I think is one of the most important things that a coach or a teacher can do, is I've dedicated myself every year to trying to learn a new skill. And so, like, this past winter, I learned how to skate ski, Nordic ski. I live in, the mountains of Oregon. So I learned how to do a new skill, and it was really hard, and it's humbling, and you stumble and you fall, and then you think you're doing well, and some 80-year-old passes you on the hill, and you're like, oh, Jesus, I suck at this, right? But when you learn a new skill, you have the beginner's mind again. And then it's this constant reminder that how I feel learning this is how my kids feel every time they show up to practice. This is completely new for them. And it's scary and it's nerve-wracking. And when I get asked to demonstrate, I don't want to do it because I know it's not going to be good. And it's really, really hard, but it's also really rewarding when I do something well. And then I want to share it and be like, hey, look, I just did my first, 20K or whatever. Like, wow, that one felt good. I didn't pass out. And so I think this is the kind of stuff that, I always say to coaches, what's the last time you truly learned a new skill? Right. And then if you have the courage to demonstrate it in front of your team as well, and show that, the instructor can also struggle at something, but that's okay because he or she has a beginner's mind. I think that's a pretty important thing as well.
No, I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. And I think, like you say, it just reminds you of where your students are a lot of the time. And especially if you do change any of their technique, you bring them back to that beginner stage anyway, because it becomes so cognitive that they have to start thinking about it, that you need to be careful you don't leave them in that space too long either. But no, great advice and great insights there, John. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, isn't it, Stu? I think as you know, restarted my journey back to playing golf, and that's been about a year now since lockdown opened up middle of May 2020. And I think, to your point, John, we've included questions like that actually for reflection within our Leadbetter Kids certification. And, whether it's learning how to cook, learning how to drive, or learning how to play golf, I think it's all relative, to understanding what it to be a student. And I've very much been a student of the game of golf, which is ironic because I've been in it for 25 years as a coach, but getting back into it as a player has taken an enormous amount of strength and willpower just to keep going, because it's been really dark at times. But what are we putting our students through? What are we truly doing as coaches, and do we truly understand the journey that we are asking our students to embark upon? And that 8-year-old, what's interesting to me is that 8-year-old has absolutely no idea what the journey is, and they're probably not interested. All they want is to have a good time. They want to be engaged in the activity, and from that engagement, they will have fun.
And they want a snack afterwards.
Exactly. They want a snack, yeah. And then the funny thing is that after a match or a game, we'll think that if the result hasn't gone according to what we thought was the right result, we will automatically think that the kids are kind of upset and pissed off. Oh, I shouldn't have said that necessarily, but you know, it's they're like they've moved on from it, haven't they? They don't care about what happened. They've had fun in their own way, and now they want to go, as you said, have a snack, go and find their buddies, have a bit of fun, do something else. And it's often us as parents and coaches that linger on stuff that actually doesn't matter to the kids, and
Yeah.
that's what we've got to be more aware of.
And one of our biggest challenges, I think, as a coach as well, is that, you know, any human being, we have outcome bias, right? So based upon the outcome, we tend to think, oh, that was good or that was not good. And so, you know, right, you said it's snowing by you, right? And so if you get in your car afterwards and you do a drive through a blizzard and you make it there, you're like, ah, it was great, I'm glad I went. And if I make the same decision and I slide off the road, I'm like, I'm so stupid, why did I drive? Now, nothing changed except the outcome. Well, how often do we play? And golf is this perfect example of, right? Like, you can play your best ever and, you know, you hit a great shot, and instead of landing 2 feet from the cup, it hits the pin and bounces into the water. It wasn't a bad shot. The outcome was horrible, right? And so, you know, I think as coaches, especially of young kids, just, it's got to be like, you know, all right, what went well today, and what needs work, and what can we learn, what can we work on in practice this week? And certainly golf, there's this endless list of things to work on. I mean, that like you said, that never ends. And so, you know, we just, and as the parent as well, I mean, when I watch The Short Game or one of these crazy films, I just get so upset of like, I told you to hit it to the right of the flag. Like, yeah, like it's so easy, right? Like you know, I told you not to hit it in the pond. Well, of course I didn't mean to hit it in the pond. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy, you know?
Yeah, it certainly is. It actually makes me think of the I've watched your TED talk a few times actually that you did, and you very eloquently describe your daughter's soccer match and kind of what was going on next door. Could you recount that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was a sort of a pivotal moment in this period of transition in my life when I was going from a full-time coach and thinking about starting Change the Game project. And I went and, you know, my daughter was 5 or 6 at the time, right? And it was the 5 or 6-year-old perfect blob soccer game, right? The kids are in a big blob and they run each other over and they can score in both goals and they're equally happy and all these things. And you're like, ah, this is great. And then right next door, there's the 10-year-old, you know, competitive game, air quotes, right? Serious game. And it's like, you know, it wasn't because the kids were trying hard. It was because all the adults were trying harder. The coaches are going nuts. They're all yelling at the 13-year-old referee. They're you know, they're yelling at the kids for making mistakes because all of a sudden, oh, this matters. And I looked at that. I'm like, does anyone in my field looking at that? The stress, the pressure, the unhappy faces, the crying kid who just got yanked out because he made a mistake and thinking like, oh, wow, I can't wait for that. 4 years? Oh, man, can't get here soon enough. Like, I don't think anyone's doing that. And so, you know, when all the evidence says that that's not a healthy environment, we need to help parents and coaches realize that that's not our goal right there. We need to just chill out. And we want to compete, right? Like, I think when you are playing a match or you're playing a game, like, you want to compete. The goal is to compete. The goal is to win. But the purpose is not. The purpose has got to be much, much bigger, because your kid's not turning pro.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, I think competition in golf is vital because it creates so many wonderful opportunities for you to learn and develop, not just as a golfer, but as a person as well. Because the game is that crazy anyway. But you know, it shouldn't be about you know, the journey to the PGA Tour. It should be about, you know, what can I learn from this opportunity, from this moment? What can I learn from my round of golf today? How do I be better at that? How can I just improve that shot a little bit? It's little moments, and I find that competition creates a more engaged kid, and a more engaged kid loves the challenge and really enjoys the feeling of euphoria when they overcome these challenges or acquire a very simple, basic new skill. You know, it could be just the element of playing a little flop shot over a bunker, as an example, which they might have had trouble with. And so I think a lot of it is about balance, isn't it? It's finding the right balance between, you know, going full on psycho, which is, you know, what you described in the 10-year-old soccer match, to actually addressing the needs of the kids and understanding what they want from playing a sport. You know, us as coaches not standing there spurting out all of this information that we know that we think is going to be useful to the kids, but actually responding directly to the kids' needs and what they want in a specific environment and or situation, right? I mean, that's
Well,
got
yeah.
to be the way with it.
And spewing out information, right? The problem with most practice sessions is not that there's not enough content, it's that there's too much, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the biggest problem that I see in most practices, is you're trying to cover too much. And so, you know, once you make 3 points, you've made none. So again, it's how to give feedback quickly, efficiently, you know, recognizing when to move on, recognizing how to add a constraint or add a challenge or something like that. I mean, that's coaching right there. How to cue. I mean, Nick Winkelman has an unbelievable book on the language of coaching, which is fantastic. And he has a PhD in language and cueing, right? So how do we cue an athlete, and how important it is to cue someone with an external cue, right? Swing like you're hitting into a pillow rather than an internal cue, like the angle of your elbow or how, you know, your knees are bent or something like that. Like, this is the kind of stuff to me that is all the difference in the world. And we have to take the time to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, if you guys are watching and have a question for John, then we'd love to hear from you. I'm so excited about finding people like you, John, that share kind of what I believe in. You know, it's we need to stick together. We need to spread the word. And I hope that in the future we have an opportunity to work closer together, not just to help you with your golf, of course, but to change the game. You know, Changing the Game project is a great title, and I want to change the way that we coach golf for sure for kids, and make sure that we speak to the needs of the children more appropriately. So, Leah, do you have a question?
I've always got questions, Gavin. Hi.
Hi, Leah.
More probably of a wondering, but the way I'm perceiving things for kids dropping out of school, I'm not, especially in the UK, is when they get to secondary school, the importance of sport dramatically goes down versus all the academic kind of subjects. So I believe that this goes deeper than what we can do as a coach or in the golf industry. I think it's almost like a society change or shift needs to be done. Just any advice on how to tap into that? Because I know from my experience, golf for me and sport was my sanctuary at the end of the day, because I'm dyslexic, and if it wasn't for sport and golf and being thriving in that area, I don't know what I would be doing, because I found school really difficult from an academic point of view. And obviously massive studies have been showing the link between more kids doing sport, that they actually do better academically as well, because the way they're learning or processing information goes up. So would you go about trying to get into the education system, or at least trying to change society's views basically on how important sport is?
Yeah, there's I would say talking about books that are interesting to read. There's a book called Spark by a guy named John Rady, and he was doing research on children with ADHD. And what he was finding in his research was that if you gave them, exercise, it was a far better thing to get them to sort of settle down and be able to focus than, filling them up with drugs. And, it's such an important thing. My own son has dyslexia, and a lot of children with dyslexia also get diagnosed with ADHD. But as you know, your brain is working really fast, and yet you can't figure it out. And so people think you're not paying attention or you're not focused. And I know as a kid, he would like come home and just say, Mom, Dad, like, I can't, I just want to do, I just don't like school. I just can't sit still for that long. And so, this book, Spark, really talked about this, that we got to get people moving. And then I helped this guy named Paul Zintarski do a TED Talk. He was from Naperville, Illinois. And they write about, and John Rady writes about this in Spark. He saw the same thing, and he was a PE teacher. And he said, what if we took the kids who needed the most help in school, the remedial math and English kids, and gave them a PE class right before their intervention class in math or English? And he has 20 years of data that show that the kids who did the same class but did PE right before it improved 10 times as much. Right. So there's evidence out there that shows the importance of this. And what his argument is, hey, PE teachers, we have to make teachers realize that we create the environment that we basically prepare the brain for learning. And if you keep cutting us out, if you keep telling kids to sit down, if you keep getting rid of gym or withholding sport from the kids who are acting out, you're not helping your cause. And so I think the evidence is now out there, but let's face it, we have an educational system that was set up 150 years ago to make people diligent factory workers that could sit around for 8 hours a day. And that's not what they need, but it's very hard to change a system once you've set it up. So good luck with that. Let me know when you figure it out.
I'm on a mission. Don't worry.
We need people on a mission. That's awesome.
I'm on a massive mission. I'm actually fortunate enough. I'm going into a school soon, which is for dyslexic children and other learning difficulties, and I'm just going to really try and promote that as much as possible, because it's so true what you're saying. In my experience, I didn't start golf until I was 13, and at that point, I was told I was never going to get GCSEs, I would be rubbish, would never get grades. But then when I started playing golf, I just excelled in all the classes, because it's almost like something clicked in my mind, like how I could solve problems, basically. And it sort of went from there. So I don't think that's too much of a coincidence. I think that is what really, really helped me. So it's just trying to go on a mission and change the education system.
Well, many dyslexic kids are very off the charts on visual spatial awareness, right? And what a wonderful game, golf, for people who get visual spatial awareness, right? And can imagine the shapes of shots and the arc of this putt and how it's going to break like that. I think that's what energizes my son. It's like this constant puzzle to be solved, which is pretty cool.
No, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean, I'm just drawn to the work of Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Very.
I love, God rest his soul. He was a brilliant man. The square peg in the round hole, in terms of the education system versus the child today. It's just so vivid, and it's shocking how we do such a disservice to our children today, and how much talent we actually lose. It's just scary, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know what he talked about in his famous TED talk, right, is we don't even know what the world's going to look like 10 years from now. Yet we're educating kids for a world 30 years from now or 40 years from now. But we're not looking at, well, what are the skills that will transcend whatever changes there are in technology or things like that. And I think sport programs, you know, regardless of sport, should look at, I mean, how different is golf than it was 25 years ago because of equipment, right? You know, and how the equipment, you can hit the ball farther and you can do more things with it and all this sort of stuff. Um, and so, you know, my dad still has his like McGregor irons from, you know, the 1950s. And, you know, if I hit that and I'm like, oh my God, my hands, like how could you even hit this thing, you know? And so, you know, what are the things that are still going to be desirable characteristics in a golfer 30 years from now that they are today? And, you know, England Rugby did this really cool study around this, and they call it the CARDS approach, CARDS, which is, you know, what they said is, you know, they were training 16-year-old young internationals, and they said, we're trying to prepare them for the game 10 years from now. So what are the things that, regardless of tactics and technique and physical training, that are still going to matter? So CARDS was like creativity and awareness and resilience and decision making and self-organization, right? And it's like, in 10 years, all those things, there's not going to be a world where they don't matter. So are we setting up our junior programs and making sure that we're stressing things that are still going to matter 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant. And it is scary, isn't it, how our education system, as you say, is 30 years, 40 years behind now.
Yeah.
You know, it barely involves the internet or understanding about it. And it's shocking. I think we'll go to Frank actually now, John, who is somewhere near your neck of the woods.
Oh yeah.
Uh-oh.
Come
Portland.
in, Frank. Where are you?
You're in Portland, Frank. Oh, awesome.
Right. Where are you at?
I'm in Bend.
Right on. Very
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. So I'm very new to coaching. I've never coached before, and I'm just starting the kids certification, and I'm a little bit stuck on some of the things in that certification. But I guess as a newbie, kind of what would you recommend, or what book would you recommend me kind of getting into? It's a little bit of a general statement from my end, I suppose, but this is definitely a new thing to me, and I'm very active myself. I grew up on the farm, you know, in Holland, in the Netherlands. Did swimming, cycling, running, and I started playing, you know, golf at 9. And I'm super active outside of my desk job, and I'm really trying to convert my career to being out there and empowering kids and people to become active and move rather than staying stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I won't even recommend a book. I'll just recommend a line from Maya Angelou poem, right? They won't remember what you said and they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. I think if you take that to every session that you do, you're going to be just fine. And cause I know that's what I do, right? It's like, if this doesn't feel good, they're not going to want to come back. So my job is to be intentional about making them feel good. Now within that, I can encourage them to compete. I can teach, I can critique, but they got to leave feeling good. And, that's what they'll remember. And if you ask me, you know, the most influential youth coach that I had taught me to play soccer and taught me to play golf, right? 2 sports that I'm still involved in today. And I just, you know, I can't remember. I'm sure part of my swing is what Mr. Bright taught me, but what I always remember him making me feel good and wanting to come back the next day. So that's the best piece of advice I can give you right there.
Awesome. I appreciate that. That makes a ton of sense. And it gets rid of some of the anxiety of going towards the end goal of elite player, of course. So.
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
Again, you know what? Like any coach will have there's only certain coaches in the world that their golfer doesn't outgrow their skill set of what they're able to teach. And so being comfortable in that niche of, hey, I want to be that, welcome to golf, first point of contact. And that's going to be, I feel great. And I love this, and I can't wait to do it more. And the parent coming and saying, all they're doing is chipping balls around the house here. Like, can you at least get them ping pong balls or something, right? But that to me is like the thing, right? If we can make them feel that way, we've got them for life. And golf is a great game that even if you put it down, you can go back to it. Right. When I had kids, I kind of put it down for a couple of years because couldn't convince my wife that 5-6 hours on a golf course was a great use of my time. Right. But then as they got older and they got to try it, well, yeah, then I can go back out and play. Right. So I think that's important.
Cool. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Amen to that, John. Amen to that. Thank you. So I think our time is drawing to a close. You've been very gracious with your time and with everything that you've shared with us tonight. How can we learn a little bit more about Changing the Game Project?
Yeah, sure. Changingthegameproject.com. That would be the mothership of where you would find blogs, all our podcasts, and then obviously all the podcasts are on Apple and Spotify and all those places. But links to books as well. My coaching book is called Every Moment Matters. And, I do think, one cool thing, Jerry and I put together a conference every year. And this year, like most people, we're taking it virtual in August. And so it's called Way of Champions Conference. And because it's virtual, we're like, well, hey, how do we really reimagine this? And so we have Steve Kerr from the NBA, Quinn Snyder from the NBA, Hall of Fame lacrosse coaches, World Cup winning soccer coach, mindfulness coach George Mumford who taught Kobe and Michael Jordan about mindfulness. They're all presenting, and it's basically be like Q&As on specific topics. And so I think that's a really great way if you're a coach and you really want to dive into the mental game, the leadership side of things, the culture side of things. There's not too many conferences out there that put away the technical stuff for the weekend. So yeah, that's coming up in August, and you can find that info on the website as well.
Excellent. That sounds like a great idea. And I also will make a point of trying to come out to Oregon and do one of these in person.
Oh,
that
yeah.
would be awesome. Sure.
Yeah, no, awesome. You can visit Frank and me on the same trip.
Fantastic. Anyway, John, look, thanks very much on behalf of me and Stuart and everybody that's watching. Really appreciate your time. Been really insightful. I look forward to spending a bit more time with you as the next few weeks and months pass, and we can do a bit of work together and tackle this problem that we've got, and hopefully more kids playing sport and being active.